Good morning and welcome to Boston Outlook. I'm your host, Julie Mara. Joining us on the line is Stoneham native Erin Dirks. She's here to talk about her 13-year-old son, Connor, who suffers from Kleine Levin Syndrome. Erin, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to our story.
I am very interested in your story. Actually, prior to being sent a link about your story, I had no idea what KLS is actually about. And doing a little research, I found out that it is a complex neurological disorder, but I have just never, ever heard of it before. It seems so rare.
So many people have never heard of KLS. We're very fortunate. We live, Stoneham's a fairly small town. And when Connor started to get sick and have symptoms, we were very frustrated. We couldn't get answers. So I started posting things on Facebook, complaining that he was still sleeping and, just how awful this was. And people just kept sending me messages to contact another family in town. And their son had KLS. So, a small town like Stoneham has two kids.
Wow.
Suffering from this.
That's a little bizarre.
It is, and that's why I think awareness is such a big deal, because they say that there's only 1,000 people worldwide with KLS. I find that just beyond hard to believe. There are no way that there are only 1,000 people that have this, because there's two kids in this town. I think that there isn't enough awareness. Doctors don't even know about it. Kids are being misdiagnosed or undiagnosed.
That's what it seems like. It also seems like these symptoms can mimic a bunch of other things.
Yes. Connor underwent multiple medical testing as well as psychological testing. We were told he could be severely depressed, bipolar, schizophrenic. And those are the things that break my heart, because to me there are many, many families and many kids out there suffering, being told that their child is bipolar, schizophrenic, depressed, lazy. And anybody who knows my son will tell you lazy is the last thing you would ever think of with him.
Well, it sounds like he was so active prior to this diagnosis.
He played soccer, football, basketball, hockey, baseball, lacrosse. I used to say to people, please, would this kid get tired?
Oh, no. Be careful.
We'd be driving home, and he'd be like, what are we going to do when we get home tonight? I'm like, oh, my gosh, go to bed?
Here's a thought. Oh, man. And now look at it, right?
Yeah.
Now you must be eating those words.
Oh, be careful what you wish for,
right?
I guess, because we got it to the extreme.
So what exactly were the symptoms leading up to his diagnosis? We've mentioned, sleeping. So
yeah. Connor had like a strep throat, and, we went through 3 courses of antibiotics, and it really just seemed to knock him out, and it just took him long to recover from that. And then he bounced back to be himself again, and then he'd go back to just being really tired. The doctor thought maybe it was mono, maybe it was Lyme disease. And, we started with very basic things like testing for that, and then we were concerned, but then our concern would be eased a little bit because he'd be back to himself.
Mm-hmm.
And then we were like, oh, is this just a strange virus that keeps coming and going? And, it was last January when it was at the point where we were like, something's really wrong. We cut back on his sports. We did 1 sport a season. We stopped sleepovers unless it was a school vacation. So, we cut back the things that maybe were putting him over the edge. So we started seeing multiple specialists. We saw people in hematology. We saw GI doctors because Connor would get a lot of nausea. But he would just sleep and just wasn't himself. Connor was always full of personality. His affect became very flat. He was just the type of kid that was the life of the party. Everybody wanted to be around him. And he kind of just lost some of that spunk.
Just out of nowhere. There was other than the strep throat, it just literally seemed to come just one day.
Yeah, it just grabbed him.
Wow.
It really just grabbed him, and it really peaked. We started the workup last January, more intensely. And over the summer, we were like, he'd go to bed at 10, he'd sleep till 2 almost every day.
Oh, wow.
And we were like, this just isn't him. Like, he used to go to park programs during the summer and ride his bike with friends all the time. And so we did, a sleep study at the hospital. He fell asleep in an MRI machine.
What?
And anybody that's had an MRI, most people get Ativan to calm themselves down.
Sure.
The tech, they let me sit in the room with him, and the tech come over the microphone and was like, Connor, and I could hear that they were starting to get a little panicked. And I peeked, at his head in the machine, and I'm like, he's sleeping. It's fine. He's asleep.
Now, when you're talking about sleep, are you talking about a really, really deep sleep, like he has no idea what is going on in the world around him?
No idea. And it's not a normal sleep. He's very shallow breathing. He becomes very pale. A lot of times his head's back, his mouth is open. I'm a nurse, and there have been times I've gone into his room and thought, is he alive?
Yeah, that would be pretty striking to see that type of behavior during sleeping.
Yeah, he looks like a corpse. And we have a puppy, and she'll go in his room and she'll jump on his bed and lick his face and climb all over him. Nothing. No response, no reaction. I've set my fire alarms off just to see. Nothing.
That was actually one of my questions, because I'm like, can this boy be left alone if he's sleeping in such a deep state? If, God forbid, something were to happen that were an emergency, what would happen?
He would not. He wouldn't know.
So
he would not know.
Do you have somebody with him 24/7?
Unfortunately, at this time, we don't, and it's scary. I mean, I run to work and get back as quick as I can. My husband works local. My parents live in town. My sister lives in town. The neighbors are aware. I've changed my work hours. I've had to cut back just to be home.
Of course, because, that's the last thing that you want is something, terrible to happen, and this poor kid is just left alone with no help, no resource.
It's a real catch-22 because he needs me to work, because we need the income, because we have to take care of him. But it's also a risk to leave.
Now, you have an older daughter, correct?
Yep, my daughter Kayla is a senior at Stoneham High School.
How has this affected her? Here these kids are in basically their prime of their childhood, and to be faced with such a burden. And not only does it affect Connor and you and your husband, it's got to have some effect on her.
It kills her. She was, at his hockey games, pounding on the glass, screaming, yelling, cheering for him all the time. They've always been very close. She'll constantly post on her Facebook page, I miss my brother. I just want my brother back. She'll text me all day from school. Is he awake? Is he asleep? Did he get up yet? I just want to see him.
So heartbreaking. I can't imagine.
It's been devastating for, all of us, for sure. My husband, he would spend all of his time when he wasn't at work either pitching a baseball, shooting hockey pucks, kicking around the soccer ball. He coached his teams. Their time together was constantly training for the next sporting event, whatever it might be. My husband was never a hockey fan. Connor started hockey. It was like we lived, ate, slept, and breathed hockey in this house. And now we just never stopped. And now it's like we just sit here and we don't even know what to do with ourselves because we were never home. We don't know what people do that don't run from sporting event to sporting event.
Right. Oh, my gosh. What a life-changing experience. So once they gave him the diagnosis, how long did it take to kind of narrow it down and hone in on this KLS?
We were pretty fortunate. Connor started getting sick in May of 2011, and by this October he was diagnosed. It really started to peak last January with the diagnostic process for him. And, I kept telling the doctors, I really think it's this. And they just, that's so rare, Mrs. Dirks. It's not. And it's a diagnosis by exclusion. So they have to rule everything else out.
Okay.
And, finally I just felt like the neurologist just was never going to listen to me say that this is what it is. I've spoken to parents of children who have this. Connor didn't have one of the characteristics of the binge eating. Connor was more nauseous. So he just wouldn't hear it. So we switched doctors, and we switched to a new neurologist at Boston Medical Center, Dr. Laurie Douglas. And, we met her once. We talked about Connor. She reviewed the testing he had, and she was like, yeah, it's KLS.
Wow. You really need to be your own advocate. And, every time I walk into a doctor's office, I'm like, oh, I went on Google and it says that I have this, this, and this. And they're like, would you please stop Googling? Like, you're going to make yourself crazy. But there is some truth behind that. I mean, it's there. It's a resource. We're probably in a better age to be self-diagnosing than ever.
Yeah.
And you really need to go in armed sometimes.
You do. You really do. And I mean, if we didn't have this other family in town, I don't know that I would have been as proactive and as aggressive with my, telling them, no, really, this is what it is.
Right.
People who don't know, that's part of why, as much as I'm thrilled my friends in town are doing this fundraiser, for me, it's like if one person that hasn't heard of KLS before hears the name, that's all I needed.
Right.
Because I know that there's no way there are only 1,000 people in the world suffering from this.
Well, I don't want to place like a misdiagnosis claim on, X number of patients worldwide, but if it kind of has symptoms that cross over into other diseases and disorders, it only makes sense that, maybe people are responding to treatment for Lyme disease or whatnot.
Yeah.
But it might be a further problem that they're just not seeing yet.
Yeah, and, part of the KLS is, there's a lot of personality changes. There's cognitive impairments, there's confusion, there's amnesia, there's hallucinations, and, the big token phrase is sleep and beauty disease. Well, there's nothing beautiful about this.
I can imagine.
I just saw a picture on Facebook, kind of mocking KLS with this beautiful girl sleeping in bed with a beautiful smile on her face. And it infuriates me because there's nothing beautiful about KLS. There's nothing fairy tale about it. It truly is a nightmare.
Now, what is Connor's reaction to all of this? I mean, he's literally had his life kind of stripped away from him overnight.
Yep. I mean, it's been devastating. And, I think he tries to protect us and pretend it's not as hurting him as much as it is.
Mm-hmm.
But just recently last week, we were having a really bad day. Connor had 2 appointments to get to, and he'll always just say, I'm so tired. And I had to push him. I had to drag him out the door. And, he was really upset, and he just kept saying, I just want my old life back. I just want my life back.
It's so
and
tough.
It's heartbreaking because, 13, that's the start of some great times. And, they say this could last 8 to 12 years. Well, if you think from 13 to 25, the things you've done in your life.
Yeah. That's literally your prime. That's when you're going out. That's when you're staying up overnights. That's when you're going out partying with your friends and, just finding you.
Yep.
So, is that one of your main concerns? You can get the health under control to a certain extent, but you can't make up for lost time.
Right. That's the one thing you never get back. You'll never get time back. Money you can re-earn. A lot of things you can get another shot at, but you don't get another shot at time. And, it's devastating. Connor's very, very blessed. He has some of the best friends in the whole world. These kids, they call him, they text him. They have their parents call and text me.
Oh.
If he doesn't answer, the parents are calling and saying, the kids are going to be out from 7 to 11 tonight. This is where they'll be. If he gets up at 8, if he gets up at 9, if he gets up at 10, bring him.
Oh, that is so sweet and so considerate. They do this consistently, it sounds like.
It does. Every single weekend, our phones are blowing up with these kids, and it's pretty much one of the big things that has gotten me through this, because Connor's sleeping, so it's hard for him when he wakes up and finds out how much time he's missed.
Right.
But we're sitting here every minute saying, I wonder if he's going to wake up. Is he going to get up for lunch? Is he going to get up for dinner? Sometimes he wakes up, it's the middle of the night, and he's up from, 1 to 4 in the morning.
Wow. So he just has no concept, really, of time at this point.
None whatsoever. Just last night, when he was going to bed, he says, I'm getting up tomorrow by noontime, no matter what. And it's like, okay, I hope you do. I hope
Right.
to see you then.
Right. Now, let me ask you this. The other child that's in Stoneham, how old is that child?
He now is graduated college. He was diagnosed his sophomore year of high school. And it seems crazy to say because you're not lucky if you have KLS, but his last episode he had was his February of his senior year. So he was fairly lucky in the sense that it was, 2 years, which is a pretty short course, seeing as, my doctor said, prepare to have this in your lives for the next 8 to 12 years.
Wow. Have you heard from anybody who has reached that maximum prognosis almost? And what are they up to these days? I mean, how are they regaining their quality of life?
Some of them have well surpassed the 12-year mark and are still having episodes or still having a hard time. Connor's in a tough spot right now. His episodes just don't seem to end. He gets like a day, 2 days, and then he's right back in. They say as the disease progresses, the time between episodes gets longer and the time in the episode gets shorter. I will say KLS picks kids. I don't know how, but these kids are pretty remarkable. Most of them that I've read their stories have very positive attitudes. They've finished high school, they've gotten through college, they've gotten married. Most of the stories I read have been successful at the end. And it's a catch-22 because I just keep saying the world is missing without Connor in it. The whole world is losing out because he's smart, he's caring, he's fun. I mean, I used to joke and say, I should bottle up and sell his DNA. He's the best kid ever. 2 years old, never had temper tantrums. I mean, I used to say if I were guaranteed more Connors, I would have kept having children because he was just the perfect kid.
Oh man, that is too funny.
It's crazy, and I'm like, I guess in a way it's good he got this disease because I do think that he has the type of personality and he's made of something special that he'll get through this. But I feel like he had such great potential that, has that been taken away from him? I guess we don't know.
Well, you know what though? You can't say it's like. I just feel like once he overcomes this, he's going to get right back to what he was before. I mean, it seems almost like if it comes on with as much of vengeance, it can go out with as much of vengeance.
Exactly. And that's the great thing is, when his friends call and there are days he'll wake up and he's kind of foggy, but he wants to be with his friends. He wants to do his stuff. So he's got enough self-confidence and enough in his head that, he'll go even if he's not 100% and kind of just be there. And like I said, I mean, I couldn't buy friends as awesome as the kids he has. They are unbelievable.
I mean, really, it just sounds like a great support system. I noticed that as part of his treatment, the neurologist had suggested that he be put on a gluten-free diet. And it sparked my interest because I was told to go on a gluten-free diet for a different reason because I have stomach issues, and that's not the point of the story. But the thing is that I feel like everywhere you go, there's this quote-unquote hype of, everybody's going gluten-free, and now this item's gluten-free, and that's gluten-free. I'm curious how this kind of plays into KLS.
Well, Connor's actually seeing a naturopath. Connor's neurologist is very open to us doing this natural, holistic path that we've chosen because there's really nothing proven in medicine to treat KLS. She's prescribed him stimulants. We take them. We discussed gluten-free with her, and she kind of was like, there's no harm in it. Try it. And, within a week or so of Connor going gluten-free, he had said to me, wow, I kind of feel better.
Wow.
And the other boy in town that had KLS, he was also did a natural, holistic approach. And he, too, is gluten-free. He's dairy-free. And his mom swears by it. She has actually opened a gluten-free, dairy-free bakery.
Where is that? Because I need to go there.
Oh, well, you'll die. There's one in Woburn, and she now just recently opened a shop in Arlington. It's something sweet without wheat.
I've had the cookies before. I haven't actually been to the bakery, but I have had them from like another store that sells them. They're delicious.
She ships everywhere, and oh my God. I mean, I'm not gluten-free, but I'm like, I'll eat that.
Yes.
I mean, her cakes are beautiful. Like, I'm like, she's been a lifeline to us. And, they just opened a new store. Like, I don't even think it's been open a month on Mass Ave in Arlington, and they're phenomenal.
It's a tough diet to be on. I mean, as an adult who's pushing 30 at this point, I mean, there are days that I just want to go home and cry, and it's like, and restaurants have been much more accommodating these days, but it's a tough diet. I can't imagine as a kid being on it.
It's hard because, part of the KLS is their behaviors and their personalities and their cognition, is really impaired. So it's like trying to rationalize with a 2 or 3 year old that's in the middle of a temper tantrum that's 3 hours past their nap time with an ear infection and teeth coming in.
Right? It's like every possible thing that could go wrong.
You couldn't even imagine. And I'm like, it's really like walking around with a 13-year-old that behaves like a complete crazy person. And there are times where it's like, well, I want real pizza. And I'm like, then have real pizza. I mean,
right.
I can't fight this battle for you. And Connor takes somewhere in the range between 20 and 30 vitamins a day.
Oh, my God.
And there are days where he's crying and I'm crying, and I'm like, just take them. And we do believe they're helping, but there are days where he's like, I'm just taking these for you. And I'm like, then just take them for me without a battle.
Right. Oh, it's like, but what do you tell a kid, I mean, and he's probably at his wit's end because he's plugging away with every ounce of energy that's possibly left in him.
It's like a fatigue you couldn't imagine. I mean, he was the nosiest kid. I mean, he never missed a beat. And even this past fall, like my husband was out back doing the leaves, and he's like, oh, I'm just going to come watch you. And normally he'd be helping. He'd be jumping in the piles. He literally laid down on my deck, and it started raining, and my husband didn't see him, and he was looking for him.
Oh, no.
And he was asleep in the rain outside on the back deck.
Oh, my gosh. Just kind of in his own little world. Like
just
nothing.
Curled up and sleep. I mean, he's fallen asleep in my dog bed. We've had a couple of episodes where there have been some just really bad hallucinations, and that's the tough part. I mean, the sleeping stinks, and the sleeping is huge, but it's the other stuff that, like, pains your heart.
Of course. It's like his personality is just taken over by this whole KLS thing.
Yeah, and, I mean, I just used to adore every second I had with him. He was like he'd play sports and play tough and play hard and crazy and football in the mud and all of that, but if I had a wedding or an event to go to, he'd come to the mall with me and help me pick out a dress.
Not anymore, though,
and
right?
he'd be like, that looks good, that looks bad. And, now it's like you can barely do anything.
Yeah. Oh, that's too bad. And I can only imagine that this has really put a financial burden on your family, which is leading me to our next point before we almost run out of time. I loved hearing this whole story. I wish I had more than a half an hour. But, you're holding a fundraiser coming up this week, March 7th. That's Thursday night, a night of inspiration at the Faith Quest Community Church. How has this all come together? It's going to be taking place in Stoneham, by the way.
Yes, my friend Caroline, her son played hockey with Connor one year, and I just happened to bump into her, and she was asking about him, and I was telling her how tough he was doing, and she had just said, oh, I'll have my church stop praying for him, and I'm like, go for it, have a party. And then she sent me a text, and she was like, hey, some people at the church, people just really want to help you guys. Would you be open to an awareness in a fundraising event? And all you have to tell me is awareness for KLS, and I will do anything.
And you're in.
I'm in, exactly, because if it wasn't for awareness, I don't know what I would be doing with my son right now. If I'd be dragging him out of bed, throwing him in cold showers, I don't know. So I thought it was this little thing at this little church in town, and I don't know what happened. It has skyrocketed. We have a Facebook page, Fundraiser for Connor Dirks, and she's working really hard to make this about Connor. She has his coaches coming to speak. there's going to be, local kids who play instruments. They're going to be playing music. The cheerleaders have gotten together. They've put together a cheer routine for Connor. They're selling, bracelets and ribbons, and it has become so much more than I ever thought.
That's awesome. I mean, it seems like just literally one mention of it, and it's just totally created its own life of its own here.
I just looked at my husband and I said, I don't know how this has gotten so big. I don't know how it happened. And I went through my phone and I'm like, this is how it started. A silly little text like, we're going to pray for him. My church wants to do something. And I thought 30, 40, 50 people will hear about KLS. My town's been inundated with it already, but hey, maybe one new person will hear about it.
Exactly. So what can we expect on the 7th?
Well, I've been a little bit left out of some of the planning because they want to surprise me, but we've got a beautiful slideshow of all kinds of pictures of Connor, and it's really just supposed to be an inspiring story about who Connor Dirks really is. We're going to highlight Connor Dirks as a student and athlete, the best son, brother, grandson in the world, and people are trying to just put out a message of hope that, yes, this will end, yes, this is awful, and just be there to support us. And, I'm, of course, printing out KLS things to pass out myself because I want this to be about Connor, and I truly appreciate the efforts to make this really be about my son because he's the sweetest thing ever. But I want to make sure that I'm doing justice to Kleine Levin Syndrome and the other sufferers.
Exactly.
So we're looking forward to it.
Yeah, it sounds like honestly, like it just sounds much more than I would have ever anticipated a night of inspiration being. I mean, it just sounds like a whole town has come together to highlight and, really just put the spotlight on Connor.
Yep.
Is he going to be there, or is it just really too hard to say?
He's not going to be there. I think that, stress is a big thing for KLS, and Connor's not used to being the sick kid. Like, we look at, there's been some articles in our local paper, and I'm like, gosh, I used to pick up the paper and see Connor scored at the hockey game. His hockey team won the tournament. Connor made the all-star baseball team. So he's gotten more comfortable with the idea. He's asking me questions about it.
Oh, good.
But I don't think he's quite able to handle all of these people talking about him, and I know I'll probably cry all night long. I don't think he can handle that.
Yeah.
So we're going to have, we're trying to get somebody to come out and video it so that when he's ready, he can see the video and see what the whole night was about.
That's a great idea. Even if people just take little snippets, everybody has an iPhone these days. They can just, video on their phone and text it to them within minutes.
Exactly. And I think he's appreciating to find out and hear how much he's loved by so many people. I mean, the building holds about a little over 200 people, and they keep saying, we're going to have a full house.
I
and
think
Connor's
you are.
Like, do I know 200 people? Are there 200 people that know me? And there are, and there are more than, that they all care enough to come out and take the time out of their night to just be there and support him.
Exactly. Well, we're almost out of time. I do want to just reiterate the details on the fundraiser. Now, it is approaching the day of, so do people need to get tickets in advance, or do they just show up?
Nope, it's all just show up at the door.
And again, that's at the Faith Quest Community Church, 50 Central Street is the address in Stoneham. And it's happening from 7 to 9 p.m. that night. You're suggesting a $20 donation.
Yes.
So any little bit helps. All the proceeds are going to Connor's medical bills, correct?
Correct. Because the naturopathy and the homeopathy, and he's doing chiropractic, none of that's covered by insurance.
So it's all out-of-pocket costs, and I know that stuff is really, it's not cheap.
Yes, and we certainly owe a lot of people for a lot of the diagnostic testing that, wasn't covered by insurance or had big deductibles and whatnot. So there is also an account set up for people that can't make it that want to donate at the Stoneham Bank on 80 Montvale Ave in Stoneham, and it's the Connor Dirks Benefit Fund.
And that's Connor, Connor, and the last name Dirks is Dirks. Well, Erin, I appreciate you coming on with us this morning. I loved hearing your story. I wish I had more time for you. Lots of success on the 7th.
Great. Thank you so much, and thank you for listening to our story.
Say hi to Connor for us.
Will do. Thank you.